All right, welcome to this lesson. We're going to discuss the way chords are constructed and the way it applies to the guitar fingerboard. What we're going to be talking about is triads. How do we construct triads and what makes up a triad? First of all, before anything about triads is going to make sense, we have to understand the major scale. And by this time, I would hope that you understand, if you're viewing this lesson, basic scale construction and hopefully all 12 of the major keys, and you can play them on guitar. If you're struggling with that, there are some lessons you can go view and download that would help you understand a little bit more about the major scale. Now what I've done here on this whiteboard is I have written out the note names for the key of C. When we're talking the basics of harmony, sometimes the key of C is the most logical key to start with because there are no sharps and there are no flats, and it makes sense. And what you have to remember is everything you do in the key of C, or any concept or principle you learn, is going to translate well and work in other keys as long as you know how those other major scales are constructed and what notes are contained within them. But we have C scale written up here. Now, the other thing I'm going to write out is the basic construction or intervallic makeup of a triad. So if we have a major triad, it consists of a 1, 3, and a 5. And what that means is from the major scale that has the same name as the chord, let's say if I was figuring out a C major triad, I would have the 1, and probably what I ought to do here is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I've got C and E, that's the 1, that's the 3, and G, which is the 5. None of these other notes are going to be incorporated into that part of the triad. Now this becomes very simple. Now that's what we call a closed position triad. And if I put these down here, if I'm going to use these notes or these magnets, C, E, and G. That makes up a C triad in what we call root position. And what that means is the root, or the note that names the chord, is in the lowest position, all right, or in the bass, some people might say. Now, if I correspond this with the fretboard, these are the notes I have: C, E, and G. And I put that off the fretboard because that indicates that it's open. That is a closed position triad. Okay? 1, 3, 5. Now, if I wanted to make this minor, the construction for a minor is 1, flat 3, 5. So what I would have to do is take my E and flat it. That becomes E flat. So the notes C, E flat, and G make up a C minor triad. All right? We have another triad. This is called the diminished triad. All right? 1, flat 3, flat 5. All right? Now we're just going to talk about this one in theory because we can't really play it with this structure because G is already being played open, and that would have to be a G flat. C, E flat, G flat. Well, we do have a G flat. It would be played actually right here, but if you've studied any physics at all, you would understand that you can't play those three notes at the same time. Two of them are on the same string. We could, however, play a C here, an E flat there, and a G flat. Now that chord becomes quite a little bit of a spread. Now if you look at it, we have the interval of a minor third and the interval of a minor third between these two notes. From here to here, minor third. From here to here, minor third. Diminished is made up of two minor third intervals. If we go back and look at the major chord, major third interval looks like this between strings 6 and 5, and then a minor third. If we go to minor triad with an E flat in it, minor third, major third. Just a little side note there for you that's kind of fun. The last and final type of triad that we're going to talk about is augmented. Okay? And it's 1, 3, sharp 5. Okay? So, here we go. C, E, there's the third, and if I have sharp 5, it has to be G sharp. There's my G, so there it is. And if you look at that, minor or major third, major third. That's the way that interval appears on that particular string grouping. Now, if we come back to our original position, you'll notice something. Looks like the exact same shape, doesn't it? Just in a different position. C, E, G sharp. All of those chords that I just demonstrated were in root position. They had the root on the bottom. One of the things I need to explain too is when we're talking about a major triad, a natural third would be referred to as a major third. If it was flatted, we would call it a minor third, which is from the minor triad, of course. Okay, so major third would be the third that naturally occurs in a major scale. Minor third would be the one that is altered by flat. Now, just maybe to back up and talk about the terminology that's used with intervals within the major scale, from C to D is, D is the 2, that is called a major second. Okay, if it was flatted, minor second. Well, we already talked about the third, major or minor if it's flatted. Third. The fourth is referred to as perfect. From C to F is a perfect fourth. Now, if it's altered, if it's sharped, it's called an augmented fourth. If it's flatted, it's called a diminished fourth. G is the fifth, and that also is referred to as being perfect. So a flat or a G flat in the key of C would be a diminished fifth. A sharped would be an augmented fifth. Now, when we get to sixth, an A natural that occurs in the C major scale, major sixth. If it's flatted, minor sixth. And the same happens with this B here, major seventh. If it's flatted, minor seventh. Sometimes you'll even hear this terminology, dominant seventh. Okay, that would refer to as a minor seventh interval also. Now, if we flat that one twice, any of your major intervals, if you flat them twice, they're referred to as diminished. Diminished seventh would be a double flat, which actually gives you an A, but sometimes it's written that way in music. So that kind of puts us up to speed with the intervallic terminology that we use. Okay, as I mentioned though, this is a C triad in root position, and actually I have to manipulate that over. So C, E, G, root position. Now if I take and I bump that C note up an octave, it gives me what we call first inversion. All right, and now I could do that with the guitar. I just have to bump this up an octave. So if I was to play this, now check this out on the fretboard. We have C, E, G. There's a triad in its basic form. Now, some of you might recognize that from the C open chord, but there's some double notes in here. C, E, G is just the basic 3 notes that make up C major. Now, if I bump up that octave, or that C up an octave, it gives me C in the first inversion. Sometimes you'll see that written as C/E, which means C with an E in the bass. What they're really saying is first inversion. Now, if I come over to the board again and I take this E and I bump that up an octave, which would do this, then I have a G as the lowest note. C/G is sometimes how you'll see that written. And what they're really saying is second inversion C chord. So here would be root position. Here would be first inversion. There would be second inversion. Now what's kind of fun about this is, since we've talked about the guitar being a horizontal instrument, I could actually, if I go back to any time I learn a new chord or a new triad, I always do this. It's kind of a fun little exercise. I will arpeggiate, which means break up the chord. I will arpeggiate each chord tone to the next chord tone as if it were in closed position. So I'll start again here with C, E, and G. Now watch this. If I go C to E in the 7th fret, C goes to E. That was the next chord in a closed next note in a closed position triad. Now I'm going to go E to G, and I'm going to go G to C. Now that gives me another fingering for a C triad. I have C major here and C major there, but this time it has E in the bass. Okay, now let's see what happens here. Now, there's a bunch of different things I could do even. If I wanted to do the inversions vertically, I could go C, put the E on the top here, like this. Boy, that gives me another inversion. It's actually a second inversion. It's the same as this chord doubled. See, one of the great things about the guitar is we have 3 or 4 places in some cases to play the exact same thing in the exact same pitch. We have to be responsible for a number of different shapes. But I find that just arpeggiating each note in the chord up to the next chord tone on the same string is a great way to really triple every chord shape you actually know. So, we have an E here in the 7th fret. E, the next note on the same string in the chord would be G. G would go all the way up to C, and C would go to E. And that gives me in the 10th fret, well actually in the 9th fret, but that gives me a C triad. Now it's second inversion, because the 5th is in the bass. Now if I go G all the way up to C, and C all the way to E, and E all the way to G, I'm clear up here again, playing this shape, and if you think about it, that is exactly the same thing as this, 1 octave higher, right? I could do the same thing with my minor chords. If I wanted to start back down here, anytime I learn a new chord or a new shape or a new concept, all I have to do is arpeggiate. The notes in the C minor chord are C, E flat, and G. I'm just going to simply go C is going to go to E flat, G to G, or I'm sorry, E flat to G, G to C. First inversion C minor chord. And you can do this, moving these chords in root position not only vertically like we did, but horizontally. And you'll be shocked how many chords you're going to come up with. If you think about it, you have one set of triads that would work on these string groups, 1, 2, 3, a second set, a third set, a fourth set, and each of those would have 3 inversions within the octave. That gives us 12 ways minimum to play every triad that we might encounter. Just simple processes, either vertically, again, just to kind of recap. We'll just have to grab another magnet. C, E, G, playing the octave game. C goes to C, E goes to E. That gives me all my inversions, or arpeggiating each chord. Now the final thing I want to talk about is the diatonic chord formula for the major scale. Okay, so get ready to write this down. It is major, the 1 chord, which is, I guess indicated by the, or the root of the scale, sometimes called the 1 chord, sometimes called the tonic, is major. The 2 chord that would start on D is minor. Minor is E minor, or the 3 chord is minor. The 4 chord, major. The 5 chord, major. The 6 chord, minor. The 7 chord, minor, and then actually, that's a big lie, is diminished, sometimes signified by a small circle, or abbreviated D-I-M. And then C, of course, would be major. So the formula is major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. That's the way the triads are going to work. Now, how do we construct those within each scale? Well, it's very simple. I just skip every other note like I did with the C, but start using each chord or scale tone as the root. So I had C, E, G. Let me write that again. C, E, G stacked. That gives me a C major triad. If I go to D, D, F, A, skipping every other note. E, G, B gives me an E minor chord. F, A, C gives me a major chord. G, B. Now I'm running out, so I'm going to have to just imagine that there was another note here, which would be D, running out of the outside of the octave. G, B, D, major. A minor is A, C, and E. You see, I skipped every other note. A, C. I've already done D and E. If I go to B, diminished, B, D, F. B, D, F. What's kind of interesting about this too is if you look on the bottom where the root notes are, it's the C major scale starting on C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Look at this. This follows the alphabet also, but starting on E. E, F, G, A, B, C, D. G, starting over the musical alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F. In a way, it's very mathematical, and it just makes so much sense. But if you understand the basic construction, major, 1, 3, 5. Minor, 1, flat, 3, 5. And what you'd find out is this is a D minor chord. But if you were to do a D major scale, which you all should be familiar with, there is not an F natural in a D major scale. A D major scale would yield a D major chord. But if we flat if we raise that F to F sharp, that would give us D major, but because it's occurring naturally as F in the C minor scale, it gives us a minor third interval, which gives us the D minor triad, and that's how it works with all of the other chords in there. This might be a lot to chew on, actually, a little bit. We covered a bunch of different things. Vertical, well, first, basic triad construction. Second was root position, first inversion with the third in the bass. Fifth in the bass is second inversion. We did that vertically along the guitar in one position. Then we also did that horizontally up the guitar by arpeggiating each chord tone to the nearest chord tone on the same string. And then we talked about also the diatonic triads that occur within the major scale. All right, and that is how triads work on the guitar, or at least an introduction into them. That is my take on how I've learned to, I guess, understand and memorize triads on the fingerboard. If you want a second opinion or another take on it, I would recommend a really fine book, Fingerboard Theory for Guitar by Corey Christiansen, which you can get through Mel Bay Publications or have your local retail store order it for you from Mel Bay.